Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're beginning the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. We'll first read the summary that Srila Prabhupada composed here in Vrindavan during the last days when he was with us. The title of the chapter is Brahma's Prayers to Lord Krishna. This chapter describes the prayers Brahma offered to Lord Krishna, who is also known as Nanda Nandana. For his satisfaction, Brahma first praised the beauty of the Lord's transcendental limbs, and then declared that his original identity of sweetness is even more difficult to comprehend than his opulence. Only by the devotional process of hearing and chanting transcendental sounds received from Vedic authorities can one realize the personality of Godhead. It is fruitless to try to realize God through processes outside the scope of Vedic authority. The mystery of the personality of Godhead, who is the reservoir of unlimited spiritual qualities, is inconceivable. It is even more difficult to understand than the impersonal Supreme. Thus, only by the mercy of God can one understand his glories. Finally realizing this, Brahma repeatedly condemned his own actions and recognized that Lord Sri Krishna, the ultimate shelter of the universe, is Brahma's own father, the original Narayan. In this way, Brahma begged the Lord's forgiveness. Brahma then glorified the inconceivable opulence of the personality of Godhead and described the ways in which Brahma and Shiva differ from Lord Vishnu. The reason for the Supreme Lord's appearance in various species of demigods, animals, and so on, the eternal nature of the pastimes of the personality of Godhead, and the temporality of the material world. By knowing the Supreme Personality in truth, the individual spirit soul can achieve liberation from bondage. In actuality, however, both liberation and bondage are unreal, for it is only from the living entity's conditioned outlook that his bondage and liberation are produced. Thinking the personal form of Lord Krishna illusory, fools reject his lotus feet and look elsewhere to find the Supreme Self. But the futility of their search is the obvious proof of their foolishness. There is simply no way to understand the truth of the personality of Godhead without his mercy. Having established this conclusion, Lord Brahma analyzed the great good fortune of the residents of Braja, and then personally prayed to be born there, even as a blade of grass, a bush, or a creeper. Indeed, the homes of the residents of Vrindavan are not prisons of material existence, but rather abodes envied even by the jnanis and yogis. On the other hand, any home without a connection to Lord Krishna is in fact a prison cell of material existence. Finally, Brahma offered his whole self at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and, praising him again and again, circumambulated him and took his leave. Lord Krishna then gathered the animals Brahma stole and led them to the place on the Jamuna's bank where the cowherd boys had been taking lunch. The same friends who had been present before were sitting there now. By the power of Krishna's illusory energy, they were not at all aware of what had happened. Thus, when Krishna arrived with the calves, the boys told him, "You've returned so quickly. Very good. As long as you were gone, we couldn't take even a morsel of food, so come and eat." Laughing at the words of the cowherd boys, Lord Krishna began taking his meal in their company. While eating, Krishna pointed out to his young friends the skin of the python, and the boys thought, "Krishna has just now killed this terrible snake." Indeed, later they related to the residents of Vrindavan the incident of Krishna's killing the Agga demon. In this way, the cowherd boys described pastimes that Lord Krishna had performed in his Balya age, 1 to 5, even though his Poganda age, 6 to 10, had begun. Sukadeva Goswami concludes this chapter by explaining how the gopis loved Lord Krishna even more than they loved their own sons. Now we'll go on to text 1 of this chapter. śrī-brahmovāca naumīḍya te bhra-vapuṣe taḍid-ambarāya guñjāvataṁsa-paripiccha-lasan-mukhāya vanya-sraje kavala-vetra-viṣāṇa-veṇu lakṣma-śriye mṛdu-pade paśupāṅgajāya śrī-brahmovāca. Lord Brahma said, "Naumi, I offer praise. īḍya, O most worshipable one. Te, unto you. Abhra, like a dark cloud. Vapuṣe, whose body. Taḍit, like lightning. Ambarāya, whose garment. Guñjā, made of small berries. Avataṁsa, with ornaments for the ears. Paripiccha, and peacock feathers. Lasat, resplendent. Mukhāya, whose face. Vanya-sraje, wearing garlands of forest flowers. Kavala, a morsel of food. Vetra, a stick. Viṣāṇa, a buffalo horn bugle. Veṇu, and a flute. Lakṣma, characterized by. śrī-brahmovāca, whose beauty. Mṛdu, soft. Pade, whose feet. Paśu-pa, of the cowherd. Nanda Mahārāja. aṅga-jāya, unto the sun. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Brahma said, "My dear Lord, you are the only worshipable Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore I offer my humble obeisances and prayers just to please you. O son of the king of the cowherds, Your transcendental body is dark blue, like a new cloud. Your garment is brilliant, like lightning. And the beauty of your face is enhanced by your guñjā earrings and the peacock feather on your head. Wearing garlands of various forest flowers and leaves, and equipped with a herding stick, a buffalo horn, and a flute, you stand beautifully with a morsel of food in your hand. Purport. In the previous chapter, Brahma, the creator of the universe, tried to bewilder the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, by stealing his cowherd boyfriends and calves. But by a slight exhibition of Krishna's own mystic potency, Brahma himself was completely bewildered. And now, with great humility and devotion, he offers his humble obeisances and prayers unto the Lord. The word kavala in this verse refers to a morsel of rice mixed with yogurt that Krishna held in his left hand. According to Sanatana Goswami, the Lord had held a cow herding stick and a buffalo horn pressed under his left arm, and his flute was placed under his belt. Beautiful young Krishna, decorated with multicolored forest minerals, exhibited opulences far greater than those of Vaikuntha. Although Brahma had seen innumerable four-armed forms of the Lord, he now surrendered unto the lotus feet of the two-armed form of Krishna, who appeared as the son of Nanda Mahārāja. Brahma offered his prayers to that form. Namo Vishnu-padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Om Adhyana Timurandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. At the end of chapter 12, Parikshit Maharaj, after hearing about the killing of Aghasura, he was surprised to hear that this incident was not described to the inhabitants of Vrindavan for one whole year. So he asked Sukadeva Goswami the question, how is it that it took 1 year for the boys to tell all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, their mothers and fathers, about the killing of Aghasura? Now we have to remember that Parikshit Maharaj, he was fasting till death. He hadn't even drunk one sip of water during all the days, hearing up to the 10th canto. He was so enraptured by hearing the pastimes of Krishna, and every detail he wanted described by his guru and the speaker of Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami. So when Sukadeva Goswami heard that question, he became enlivened and began to praise Parikshit Maharaj, that by your hearing and chanting you will attain perfection. And then he began to describe what happened. How when Brahma and all of the demigods, from the clouds they were watching the killing of Aghasura. Brahma, who was the chief engineer of this universe, although he was told and he knew that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to test him. Now this happens sometimes amongst the devotees and the Supreme Lord. Sometimes, for instance, when Hanuman was flying, the demigods wanted to test Hanuman, and they sent Surasa to eat him, and he was able to pass that test. First he became very big, then he became so small he could fly in and then fly out again. So in this way, sometimes the devotees, they test the Supreme Lord and they test each other, their potencies. So Brahma, thinking himself as a very big chief engineer of this universe, he thought, let me test this little boy. I'm so big and he's so small. So he stole the cowherd boys and the calves just for a moment by his time. His time is 1,000 times the 4 yugas. That's 1,000 times 4,320,000 years is just 12 hours of Brahma. So you multiply that by 2, by 365, by 100. So for Brahma, just a few moments is a long time for us on this planet, because everything is relative in time in the material world. So his one moment was 1 full year for Krishna. Krishna, understanding everything, we know, he went, he looked for the calves, couldn't find them, came back, couldn't find the boys. So very easily, with just one spark of his mystic potency, he recreated everybody, all new, and he brought them back for 1 year. So there were 2 purposes to that particular Leela that we read about in the 13th chapter. One was to give special mercy to the mothers. Mothers meaning both the mothers of the boys and the cows, because they gave the topmost offering to Krishna of their milk during that 1 year, better than any sacrifice in the whole universe, that offering of milk with love. And the second was to humble Brahma. So then when Brahma came back and he saw Krishna with everyone, he became bewildered, perplexed, he couldn't understand. And then Krishna gave him special, different facets of darshan. First, Krishna showed him all the cowherd boys and calves. Then he showed him that actually these cowherd boys and calves were Vishnu Murtis. Then he showed all the living entities, including himself, worshipping these Vishnu Murtis. And by that time, Brahma was so confused that Krishna took mercy on him and removed all of his maya, and there he was standing again, right here, just like this description in this verse, with the little morsel of rice and curd and some, they say it was some achar made of tanti, dripping from his fingers in his left hand, a little boy. So Brahma first he was perplexed, then he was humbled, and then by Krishna's mercy, he got the audience of the Lord. So after being stunned and experiencing so many bhavas, so many different ecstatic symptoms, he wiped his 8 eyes with his 2 hands, and then he had this darshan of the original form of the Supreme Lord in Braj as a young boy. Now, just as with a plant, you have so many different types of seeds, and all seeds grow with 2 things. That's soil and water. But when you put the water onto the plant, onto the seed, each seed will grow in a different way. So this particular form of Krishna that he was giving darshan to Brahma, this is the form that we all see of Shyam Sundar. This is Krishna in his Balya Roop, a young boy, 5 years old, beautiful golden dhoti, shining like lightning, with his bluish cloud-like body form. And because he was in Braj, he was decorated with guñjā. Guñjā are the little black and red berries that grow here. He had them as earrings. And he had, because the boys during the day, they would get flowers and leaves from here and there, they would tie them together, no needles or no glue guns like we used to make our things. No, they would tie them together and put them around Krishna's neck, forest flowers, Galadesha, Vanamala, just like we read about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he was decorated. So these are the supreme decorations of Braja. When Brahma saw this, just as when each one of us have darshan of the Supreme Lord, according to our particular relationship with Krishna, all of our ecstatic love becomes manifested. It's an impetus, having darshan of the Lord. That's why it's so important to come for darshan of the Lord, because our ecstatic love is then awakened by this darshan. So Brahma, he had a particular relationship with the Lord. Brahma is just like any of us sitting here, like the bugs, like the microbes. He's a jiva, an ordinary jiva. But because of his superlative service, he's an appointed officer in this universe. He's a jiva who is given very responsible service by the Supreme Lord to create all of the living entities within the universe. He's one of the fathers of all the living entities. He's one of our fathers. You go all the way back. All of us came originally from Brahma, and Brahma came from Narayan. And Narayan is just a portion of, go all the way back, of the same Krishna who's standing before Brahma now. So he's called, you can read about this in Nectar Devotion, he's a Adhikrita Dasa, servant. That means an appointed officer. And when he had this beautiful darshan by Krishna's mercy of Lord Krishna as a young boy in Braja, all of his ecstatic symptoms manifested, and his love increased more and more. So the first thing that he glorifies is this beautiful form of the Lord. Now this form is only visible in Braj. And the example is given by Rupa Goswami, that even when Krishna, he just went 8 kilometers from here to Mathura, when he was in the arena with Kamsa and all the wrestlers. So there was another form manifested. It was a 2-armed form, and the exact same description is given. He had a yellow dhoti, he had a bluish cloud-like hue of a body, but he was decorated differently. He had what Narada Muni describes is, along with the cloud and the lightning, he had the sun and the moon. That's because in one hand, the sun was the chakra, and the moon was the conch shell. Even if you go here, the Birla Mandir, you'll see different insignias, depending upon the mood of the devotees and the particular task that Krishna is going to perform in his different avatars, in his different expansions. So this particular form is so special, and it is the most superlative form. And that is why Brahma starts his prayers by glorifying the beautiful form of Shyamsundar Krishna, who is the eternal sun, this paśu-pa aṅga-jāya. Paśu means animals, we know that. Pa means the protector of the animals. Anga means from the body, and Jaya means born from. So this is the eternal form of Krishna, who is the son of Nanda Mahārāja. Now some of the relatives of Nanda Mahārāja, they'll call him Nanda Nandana, because when we, later on, we'll hear when all the boys came back and finally were telling everyone about the killing of Aga, some were praising Krishna as, oh, Yashoda Nandan, only he could do something like that. They were the relatives of Yashoda. And then the others, oh, Nanda Nandan. So again, according to the relationship that the devotee has with Krishna, they will see him differently. So Brahma goes on for 40 verses in this chapter. And the acharyas describe that within these 40 verses, you have the entire philosophy of devotional service. He's very much humble, and he prays for forgiveness. First he says, just like a father, he'll forgive his son, because he understands that Krishna is the origin of the Narayan from whom he was born. Narayan was both his mother and his father, because he's also Aja, unborn. So he says, you're just like my father, you please forgive me, and you're just like my mother. Because, and the proof he gave was Mother Yasoda When she went to look if Krishna had eaten dirt, when Krishna opened his mouth, she saw within his abdomen the entire universe. So he said, you're just like my mother because this entire universe is within your abdomen. So I'm also there. And just like when a baby, I don't know how many of you have had babies here, doesn't look like many of you would. During pregnancy, as the baby grows, the mother has the wonderful experience of the kicking of the baby within the abdomen. She'll be sitting, reading a book. This used to happen. I'd be reading Bhagavatam in Prabhupada's house and suddenly a kick. So that's what happens as the baby's growing. And they make themselves very, very much known after the 7th month with their kicking. But the mother, she takes it as ecstasy. She tolerates, of course. It doesn't matter. She knows that baby's going to be out soon to love. So Brahma said, the offense that I committed by causing some disturbance in your pastimes, because you're also my mother, you just take that to be like the kicking of the child within the womb of the mother. You take that as a loving exchange. So he was praying for forgiveness, and at the same time he was giving the highest philosophy. Now, Prabhupada describes here that yesterday at the end of the class we were discussing about liberation. If you die here, are you liberated? Where do you go? What happens? Do you go directly to the spiritual world? Now, for the devotee, none of this matters. Absolutely none of it, because the devotee he hates the thought of liberation. We heard that there are 5 types of liberation. 4 will be accepted so that they can do service for the Lord. The 5th is never accepted by the devotees. But any type of liberation is not aspired for by the devotees. And Brahma shows this. Because of his particular relationship with Krishna in Dasya Bhav, that's called Sambrahma Priti Bhakti Rasa, technically, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he immediately understood that this is my master and I am his servant. And nothing in this entire material world is of any value. Neither liberation, nor attaining the heavenly planets which he had created. He explained to Krishna that you take your hand, and each one of our bodies is just the size of 7 hands. So Brahma also, he said, I'm very big, but my body also is just the size of 7 hands. So the size of a body doesn't matter. The elevation of the body doesn't matter. And just as Uddhava, because Uddhava is also in this mood of a servant, a different type of a servant, he's the parishad servant. But he had the same prayer. He didn't want liberation. He didn't want to get free from the material world. He only prayed, and this is very important. Brahma did not even pray for the dust from the lotus feet of Krishna. He prayed to become a bush, a creeper, a blade of grass, and even, Vishwanath Chakravarti says, even if it became a little stone on the pathway, he was praying. Not to get the dust of Krishna's lotus feet, but to get the dust on his head of the residents of Vrindavan. Why the residents of Vrindavan? They're just they appear to be ordinary householders, taking care of their children, taking care of their animals, cleaning their houses, cooking, herding the cows all day. What's so special about the residents of Vrindavan? The speciality is every single thing is dedicated in their life to Krishna. Everything. Normally, in the material world, our desires are like thieves. They steal our life away, trying to fulfill our desires. Our homes are like prisons, because we can't get out of this family life. And Prabhupada says not only family life, He said, even for a sannyasi, if they develop attachment to their temple, to their properties, to their projects, that's another type of imprisonment. He says, not as strong as family life, but it's still an imprisonment. So the home, the griha, is like a prison. And the relatives living within your home are just like prison mates. That's why when we become devotees, it's like we've gotten out of prison and we have so much compassion. Oh, I've left my mother behind, I left my brother behind, my sister's crying. We have compassion because they were the prison mates that we were suffering with in the prison all that time. We want to get them out also. So the family members are the prison mates. And the attachments to the family members, there are the foot shackles that keep us in the prison. So that's material life. Later, Prabhupada quotes, Janasya moho yam aham mameti. Now this was an answer because after Parikshit Maharaj, who's also in the servitor mood, a third type, he's a parishad also, and he was hearing from another type, a Sharanya, that's Sukadev Goswami, who was a Gyani Charu. Gyani Charus, we know them like the four Kumaras. They were aspiring for liberation, but when they had the beautiful darshan of the Lord, everything evaporated and they just wanted to become the servants of the Lord. So all of these servants together in their different moods were relishing the darshan of the Lord and the beautiful prayers of Lord Brahma in these 40 verses. So after Brahma completes his 40 verses, because he was a posted officer, Krishna's standing there, he's completely silent. He's a little boy. Brahma, he goes on to pray that I know you're the Supreme Lord, and as he says in Brahma Samhita, Angani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti. You can do anything with all of your different senses. And as a matter of fact, Krishna, he can not only do anything with his senses, but he can do anything with the senses of the Purushas and with our senses, with the senses of the Jivas. The example of that is the Guru. Now the Guru, we offer everything first to the Guru. That's the padati when we do archana. Always first to the Guru. The Guru accepts, he sees it, and then he gives it to Krishna. So this transformation of the different senses, the different parts of the body, Krishna's bodily parts are not limited as ours are. But Krishna was playing the part of a little boy. So he was standing there waiting for Brahma to finish all of his exalted prayers. And when Brahma finally finished, he was thinking, I'm just a little boy. Who is this big man? I want to get back and play with my friends and have lunch. So he remained completely silent. He didn't give any response to Brahma. And at that time, Brahma realized, it's time for me to get back to my service. Because it's higher to engage in one's devotional service than to be right there next to the Supreme Lord. And that's something that we always need to remember. That more important, and we had this experience also with Srila Prabhupada. While Prabhupada was sick here, someone came from the Gurukula in Dallas, the headmaster. And Prabhupada was very concerned that what's going on there, because at that time, the government was coming down upon the Gurukula. They were thinking of shifting the children here. So he sent the headmaster back immediately to take care of the situation. And then after 2 weeks, the headmaster came back. Prabhupada said, what are you doing here? I sent you there to take care of things. Get out of here. So when we do our service, Prabhupada or your guru or whatever the temple authority is will get a particular order. And that order is more important than the proximity to the Lord. So that's very important in our service. We have to fulfill the orders given to us. So Brahma, understanding that it was time for him to go back to Svargaloka, and by that time he was thinking himself that I'm just like a Brahma Rakshasa coming down from Satyaloka to disturb the Lord. Because even when he was offering the prayers, it wasn't in the mood that Krishna was manifesting here in Braj. So he left, and then Krishna, he wanted to go back to his friends. Immediately everything was remanifested, because according to the boys, now this is described that Yogamaya, what she actually did was, she kept Aghasura right where he was, but she covered him, and she kept the boys right where they were. So Krishna just went right back, and there were the boys, and they were saying, and when Prabhupada gave this summary, of course Prabhupada has a way of, his English is, it's not the, like when he said, we didn't have a morsel of food of our lunch until you came back. So he said, we didn't have our tiffin until you came back. Now tiffin, that's only in India. Nobody else knows what a tiffin is. But here, everyone understands what tiffin is. And then Ajagara, the python. So Prabhupada called the python Ajagara. So then the English translation is python. So Prabhupada, in his way of speaking, particularly the way he describes things in English, are so beautifully done in this summary. So then Krishna went back, and the boys had their lunch, and then it was time to go home. And the boys, when they reached there, they were all glorifying Krishna. Today Krishna killed Aghasura, and everyone was praising Krishna. And when they had this beautiful vision of Krishna, just like when Brahma had this beautiful vision, within his heart all these prayers came. So each one of the gopis, the gopas, all of the residents of Vrindavan, all their love was manifested when they saw Krishna returning from the pasture grounds. Mother Yasoda, because during this interim year, Krishna was in Balya Leela at the beginning of the year. When he came back that day, he was in Poganda Leela. It was a year later, he was 6 years old. The boys also had grown within that year, although they were just sitting there, although they didn't notice it. So the boys were a little bigger when they came back. So then, this is verses 40 to 49. When Parikshit Maharaj heard how everyone was glorifying Krishna, how much everyone loved Krishna in Vrindavan, in Braja, right here in Chatikara this happened, Parikshit Maharaj, he asked the next question that would propel the forthcoming Leelas that Sukadeva Goswami would describe. He said, why is it that all of the inhabitants of Braja are so attached to Krishna more than to their own self? Because in the material world, Sukadeva Goswami explained, in the material world, everyone is most interested in themselves. First, if there's some danger, we'll first try to protect our own body, then the extensions of our body. So that's because the Atma, we are the Atma, right? But higher than the Atma is the Supreme Self, which is Krishna. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, they love Krishna more than their own self, and therefore they're so attached to him. They have given everything to him. So one of the prayers that Brahma describes is, and there are several prayers here that you'll find all throughout Prabhupada's books. One is number 8, and then another one that he describes is, you are so merciful that even when Putana took the disguise of a devotee, you gave yourself to her and to her family members, which was Baka and Aga. You completely gave yourself to her, and you gave them liberation. That's how insignificant liberation is, even the demons get it. So since you gave yourself to Putana, what do you have to give now to these residents of Vrindavan who have given everything to you? There's nothing left because you gave yourself to Putana. So the devotee, they've given their body, their minds, and their words to Krishna, everything. How does Krishna reciprocate? He gives his body, mind, and words to the devotees. The devotees are always thinking how to serve Krishna, and Krishna is always thinking how to serve my devotees. So this is the reciprocation that Krishna has with the pure devotees of Braja. They have given everything to Krishna, and Krishna, in reciprocation, gives him his body, mind, his words, everything to serving these devotees. So, in conclusion, there's a very beautiful verse. I'm just going to jump to it because it's so special, and it's one that we've all heard. But it comes from this place, and that is sloka number 58. This is Sukadev speaking. It starts out with samashritaye padapallava plavam. So we've all heard that one. For those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Murda demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. Their goal is Parampadam, Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. So in this material world, Lord Brahma explains in his prayers that if we see a rope lying on the ground and we mistake it for a snake, then we become very worried. But then when we realize it's just a rope, then we're not worried. So the rope and the snake analogy are within this material world, because we're always in a frightened and a precarious situation in the material world. Whether it's a rope, whether it's a snake, because our senses are imperfect, we can't always recognize things. But Prabhupada, he gives an example. He said one time he was flying from Paris to London. So go Paris to London, that means you're flying in this direction, which is the same direction that the sun is going. For 13 hours, it was full daylight, because there was no day and night underneath. He wasn't in one place. He was going along with the sun. He said that is the way a devotee lives. When you're on the sun, there's no question of day and night, because it's always brilliant sunlight. So when you're with Krishna, there's no question of good, bad, happy, sad. None of the dualities are there, because you're always with the Supreme Blissful, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the previous chapter, we've all heard of Satchidananda Vigraha, and we know that when we attain perfection, we also have our Swarup Siddhi is Satchidananda Vigraha. So in the previous chapter, these words are described a little differently. Satya, Jnana, Ananta, Ananda. So Satya means we know all the truths about Krishna. Jnana, Satya means the supreme truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Jnana means we have all knowledge of him. And Ananta, Ananda, we're always enjoying supreme bliss with Krishna. Now, one may ask, well, where was the supreme bliss when Draupadi's sari was being taken from her, when the Pandavas had to be exiled, when Krishna left Vrindavan and everyone was thrown into an ocean of separation? Where is that bliss? So Krishna, in order to increase the attachment of his devotees to himself, he gives them experiences so that they can take full shelter of him. And for those of us who are not on the perfected platform, because the only thing that separates us from this supreme perfection of devotional life is our anarthas and our attachments, right? So what Krishna does for devotees such as ourselves is, he gives us, they're not punishments like when you get from doing bad karma or good karma. He gives us different types of sufferings in our life so that we will become completely attached from everything in this material world. Has anyone experienced that in their life? That Krishna arranges our life in such a way that we can only take shelter of him. He describes in the 88th chapter of the 10th canto, and Prabhupada would often remember this sloka, that when I favor my devotees, I take everything away from them. So this is what often happens in a devotee's life. Everything is taken away from him so that he only has Krishna to take shelter of. So whatever miseries, so-called miseries we're experiencing in our devotional life, whatever tests we're experiencing, we have to see that all as the direct intervention of Krishna so that we will take complete shelter of him. And just as in the case of the Pandavas, any time, and they went through so much suffering, they're the ideal example of everything being taken away from them. Everything was taken from them. They had no one but Krishna, and when they had no one but Krishna, then Krishna came. He came to be with them. Where did they take shelter? They were here in Kamyavan. Krishna would come to see them from time to time. So for the devotee, when they see that their life is falling apart, when nothing is going the way they planned it, you see that as the special mercy of Krishna. Because each one of us has a direct relationship with Krishna. Each one of us, when we take darshan of Krishna, he is going to give us that impetus of love to serve him in a particular way according to our rasa. And anything that happens in our life is being directed by Krishna so that we will take absolute and complete shelter of him. So this is the ultimate essence of this particular chapter. We hear the entire Vaishnava philosophy coming from the four mouths of Brahma. When Brahma was speaking, from his four mouths, everything he said was being said by the four mouths at the same time, simultaneously. So first we have Brahma's beautiful prayers, then we have Krishna returning to his friends, coming back to Braja. Then we have Parikshit Maharaj asking the questions, why, the question was, why are the residents of Vrindavan so attached to Krishna? Then we have this beautiful reply by Sukadeva Goswami, how when you become completely attached to Krishna, all the miseries in this material world, from a huge ocean, become no bigger than the water in a calf's hoof print. So small. And then after that, because by this time Sukadeva Goswami, he was feeling such ecstasy, he wanted to describe more pastimes. He began to describe the beautiful games that Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys, now that they were in Poganda Leela, that they used to play together. They would play hide and seek. They would imitate the buzzing of the bees. They would imitate the parrots. They would imitate the monkeys. They would make very low sounds like the bulls and the cows to call the bulls and cows, and the bulls and cows would answer them again. So these are the games that the boys would play. And Krishna, although he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full in all opulences, he just wanted to play like an ordinary boy here in Vrindavan. And Sukadeva Goswami was giving a glimpse of these pastimes at the end of this chapter, and then we'll hear more. Now we'll go through day by day the beautiful prayers, the beautiful realizations that Brahma had after he was humbled, and how we can learn from his offense and his perplexity and his begging of forgiveness, how in our own life, how we've forgotten Krishna, how now we've come to the shelter of his lotus feet, begging him, please forgive us for all the offenses we've committed. Now you please accept me as your servant. Hare Krishna. Daivi.
So, Shraddha, this faith, that, by hearing about Krishna, or that Krishna's taking everything away and I need to accept that, is faith something that's inherently available, or is there a way of awakening the faith and the determination and clarity to understand that Krishna's got his hand in all these activities which are going on in our lives, to help us surrender more to him, but without the faith, then you don't want to let go of the other things that we're holding on to.
That's the importance of sadhu sangha. First comes faith. We have a little bit of faith that maybe all of the things I've been reading about in the scriptures, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. So then with the little faith, we seek out the association of devotees. And by hearing from devotees, then our faith increases, so that then we want to engage in the bhajana kriya, the same thing that the devotees are doing. So it all begins with just a spark of faith. That faith is solidified by association with devotees, and then by that association, we want to practice devotional service just like the devotees are doing. So starting with faith, everything goes on from there. Yes.
To continue the same line, so what we have seen is when we talk about service, so one's attachment to service to a certain extent is fine, but we have seen that it becomes an unhealthy attachment sometimes, and that can also be an impediment for our growth in Krishna consciousness. So how would you comment on that?
A devotee is prepared to do any service. He's prepared to go to hell. He's prepared to enjoy in a beautiful palace. For him, which type of service doesn't matter. For him, the purpose that he's doing the service matters, and that's to please the Supreme Lord. So if we become attached to a particular type of service, it's just like, as Prabhupada describes, these shackles again. We should be prepared to do anything for Krishna. Just like Srila Prabhupada, the thought of him taking sannyas, he would just wake up, horrible, how can I take sannyas? He didn't want to take sannyas, but he knew he had to take sannyas in order to fulfill the order of his spiritual master. So sometimes when we're asked to do things, the thought of it might be horrible because we're very happy in the service that we're doing. But it's not that particular service does not identify us. It's the relationship that we have with Krishna that identifies us. So therefore we should be prepared to do anything for Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, class. As you said that when we are having difficult times and we surrender to Lord, our prayers becomes very deep and very personal. But by the mercy of Lord, when things becomes normalized, the surrender tends to fade away. So how to keep that surrender intact over time? How to do that?
That's why Kunti Devi prayed. Let me bring it all on. Because when there are miseries, then I always remember you. And as soon as everything's nice, then you leave us and I forget you.
So does that mean that misery is beneficial for our devotional service? Does that mean that misery is beneficial for our devotional service?
It's not that it's beneficial, it comes along with the service. There's always a challenge, and that challenge is what's going to keep us attached to Krishna. If there's no challenge, then we become complacent. There's no place for complacency in devotional service. We're looking for challenge, we're looking for risk, but not unnecessary risk. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.